Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom's conversation today on the significant progress Sudan's transitional government has made to advance freedom of religion or belief in the country in just over a year. My name is Dwight Bashir, and I'm Director of Outreach and Policy at USCIRF. For those not familiar, USCIRF is an independent, bipartisan U.S. federal government body created by the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, or IRFA, to monitor religious freedom abroad and to make policy recommendations to the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, and Congress. Our work is led by 9 commissioners appointed by the President and the leadership of both political parties in the House of Representatives and the Senate, and is supported by a professional staff of about 20. To put things in context today, just last year, Sudan was still run by then President Omer al-Bashir, who was wanted for a decade on charges of genocide and crimes against humanity against his own people. After months of protests, the Sudanese people remarkably overthrew al-Bashir in April 2019, and a transitional government was formed in August. Almost immediately, the transitional government started implementing a range of religious freedom reforms and other human rights. I am joined today by 2 of our commissioners who led a USCIRF delegation to Sudan earlier this year. First, we have Vice Chair Anurima Bhargava and our second Vice Chair, Tony Perkins. We are also fortunate to be joined today from Khartoum, Sudan, Sudan's Minister of Religious Affairs, Nasreldin Mufrih, who we met with during the Prime Minister's visit and his delegation to Washington, D.C. late last year, and again in Khartoum earlier this year. Today's event will begin with opening remarks from Vice Chair Bhargava, who will focus on USCIRF's engagement with Sudan and some of the background context. And Vice Chair Perkins will then discuss some of the specific areas of progress, as well as USCIRF's 2020 recommendations to the U.S. government to support these reform efforts. We will then hear from Minister Mufrih about the concrete steps his government has taken to improve religious freedom conditions in Sudan. Afterwards, I'll moderate a brief conversation among the speakers with some opening questions. Then there'll be some time for questions from the audience. So to ask a question, please use the Zoom webinar's Q&A function at the bottom center of your screen to submit your question in writing, which you can do at any time now as the event gets started. It's now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Vice Chair Anurima Bhargava.
Thank you, Dwight, and thanks to all those who have joined us today. Minister Mufrih, it's a pleasure to see you again after having a chance to visit with you in Sudan. As you may know, for 20 years, USCIRF has recommended Sudan be designated by the State Department as a country of particular concern, or CPC, for engaging in systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom. President Omer al-Bashir ruthlessly applied his own interpretation of Islam on Muslims and non-Muslims alike. Since assuming power last year, Sudan's joint civilian and military transitional government has taken concrete positive steps, including repealing laws and regulations that restricted religious freedom. These efforts include the recent passage of the Miscellaneous Amendment Act, which repealed the Apostasy Law, ended flogging, banned female genital mutilation, FGM, permitted non-Muslims to drink alcohol, and abolished the guardianship law, which had required women to get a permit from a male guardian for traveling abroad, even with their children. The repeal of the Apostasy Law was an extraordinary step forward, given how entrenched such laws have been in the region and beyond. We hope Sudan's repeal of the law serves as a path on many of these fronts for other countries to follow. These legal changes are part of a significant ground shift in Sudan towards advancement of religious freedom issues, which we will hear more about from the minister momentarily. Over the past year, we have had the privilege of active engagement with the transitional government on issues related to religious freedom or belief. In December 2019, Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and his delegation visited with USCIRF and discussed his government's commitment to advance religious freedom for all the Sudanese people. We were very encouraged by the progress that the transitional government had made and has made on a series of reforms to advance religious freedom. In February, I was part of a USCIRF delegation with Vice Chair Perkins that traveled to Khartoum to assess conditions on the ground. Our delegation met with members of political party leaders and women's rights advocates to gain a firsthand perspective on how the country's sweeping historic changes have impacted religious freedom conditions. Our partners on the ground freely discussed with us the opportunities presented by the transformation and change, as well as the challenges of a 30-year legacy of systemic religious oppression. I, like many of you, was and am deeply inspired by how Sudanese women, from tea sellers to teachers to community leaders, played a transformational and catalyzing role during the revolution. We had the honor of meeting with many women leaders during our time in Sudan. Their collective action and continued organizing efforts after the revolution have resulted in tangible changes, including the repeal of the public order law and many of the legal reforms I've just described. Building from their foundational role during the revolution, Sudanese women are demanding equal representation in all branches of government. Women are represented, though not equally, in the executive branch, and they have secured 40% participation in the parliament, which is still yet to be formed. We also heard of the efforts of the Department of Education to engage in a wide-scale review of curricular materials to identify and address the religious dictates that had been included in the curriculum under the Bashir government, and to build a curriculum that supports a sense of dignity and belonging for all. This opportunity to travel to Sudan after the toppling of former President al-Bashir. In short, we found that Prime Minister Hamdok's government, with a great deal of grace and dignity and humility, continues to deliver on their commitment to improve religious freedom for all. We look forward to an update on these efforts from Minister Mufrih shortly. Now let me turn it over to my colleague, Vice Chair Perkins, to provide more detail about some of the progress in Sudan and also discuss our recommendations to the US government to support Sudan's transitional government to advance religious freedom issues and to protect the dignity and lives of all of its people.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bhargava. It was good to join you on our trip to Sudan. And I also want to join you in thanking the minister as well as our audience for engaging in this extremely timely and prescient discussion. It's good to see you again, Minister, this time virtually after having met previously both in Washington and in Khartoum. Now, since assuming office, Sudan's transitional government has made what we see as notable progress in numerous areas, as Vice Chair Bhargava outlined. And let me highlight just a few of the encouraging examples that we've seen. First, the government repealed the repressive public order law that the former regime had used to punish individuals, particularly women, who did not conform to its strict interpretation of Sunni Islam. And second, it disbanded the church councils that we heard from many church leaders that the former regime used to justify the systematic oppression of Christian minorities. Third, it has appointed a Christian Coptic woman to the Sovereign Council, which is charged with overseeing the 3-year transitional period. And finally, the government designated December 25th as a national holiday so its Christian community could celebrate openly and freely, all significant. To build upon the historic progress Sudan has made thus far in 2019 and 2020, which is quite significant, as Vice Chair Bhargava said, we've made, as the USCIRF Commission, we've made several recommendations to support continued progress. First, that the State Department should no longer designate Sudan as a country of particular concern, or CPC, for engaging in systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom, and instead put Sudan on the special watch list pursuant to the International Religious Freedom Act. If Sudan continues to make progress like it has, perhaps it will be removed from this list as well. Secondly, we recommend the U.S. government should provide technical and financial assistance to support institutional reform, particularly to the Ministry of Education, to replace the former government's intolerant curriculum with new material and accompanying teacher training that supports religious freedom. Thirdly, that the U.S. government should support the government's implementation of transitional justice, legal reform, and constitutional reform, and the establishment of an independent commission for religious freedom, an independent civil society to promote the freedom of religion and related rights. Next, the U.S. government should support the creation of a high-level international advisory body for human rights in Sudan to hold regular dialogues on reform and progress with its international allies. And then finally, the United States should encourage the transitional government to host the UN Special Rapporteur for freedom of religion or belief, Hamid Shahid, in Sudan when the spread of the coronavirus is under control. Now, we were pleased to see that the U.S. government recently pledged a total of $356.2 million at the Berlin Donor Conference to help stabilize Sudan's economy and support transition to democracy. Now, we continue to urge our government to support the transitional government to further implement genuine reforms that enhance human rights, including religious freedom. Now, for a more detailed understanding of the ongoing reforms to advance religious freedom efforts in Sudan, I want to turn to our distinguished guest speaker for today, Minister Mufrih, the Minister of Religious Affairs. Minister, the floor is now yours. Thanks so much for being with us.
أولا حاجة أهلا ومرحبا بكم في هذا الاجتماع، وسعيد بأني أنا أتلاقى مع مجموعة منكم. تلاقينا معهم في أمريكا، تلاقينا معهم في السودان، والآن نلتقي معهم في المرة الثالثة. ده كله في إطار في السودان بعد الثورة العظيمة اللي أنجزها الشعب السوداني أبناء وبناته بعد الانتفاضة العظيمة في ثورة ديسمبر. الثورة السودانية كانت عندها مبادئ واضحة جدا. أفتكر أنه مبادئها كانت بترتكز على اثنين. في المقام الأول مبدأ المواطنة الراشدة، ومبدأ المواطنة ده بيقوم على أساس الحقوق والواجبات، ليس على أساس الدين ولا على أساس اللون ولا على أساس النوع ولا على أساس الإثنية أو القبيلة، وإنما هي المواطنة هي أساس الحقوق والواجبات. وكذلك يقوم على مبدأ المساواة المطلقة ما بين الرجل والمرأة، ما بين المدنيين والقرويين، ما بين الصغار والكبار. هذه المساواة المطلقة تقوم على أساس المواطنة. هذه هي المبادئ بتاعت الثورة اللي انطلقنا يعني.
Sorry, Minister Mufrih, sorry to interrupt you. We had an interpreter with us who I think has not been able to, who might have gotten kicked off. We're going to get him back. In the meantime, we're going to have our analyst on Sudan, Mr. Mohy Omer, do some translation. If you could let him jump in. Sorry for that interruption. Mohy, please go ahead with an initial translation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dwight. First of all, the minister said he's really happy to be with you all. He's exceptionally excited to see the delegation that he met in Sudan, as well as in Washington, D.C., and his government is working diligently to make sure that they address human rights issues, including freedom of religion and belief in Sudan. واصل يا السيد الوزير.
وكذلك من الأهداف الثلاثة التي ترتكز عليها الثورة هي الحرية والعدالة والسلام.
Our revolution came to address three main issues. Number one, freedom. Number two, justice and equality for all.
وفي المبدأ الحرية نحن ارتكزنا ارتكاز أساسي على الاعتقاد، مبدأ الحرية الاعتقاد والتدين، وكذلك حرية التفكير، وكذلك حرية التعبير، وكذلك حرية العمل. هذه هي مبادئ الحرية المطلقة. الإنسان حر في أن يعتقد بالدين الذي يرتضيه. فلذلك أول ما جينا لهذه الوزارة بعد الثورة مباشرة أطلقنا مبدأ الحريات الدينية العامة في السودان، من واقع أن السودان يعني بلد متعدد في أديانه، متعدد في قبائله وفي مذاهبه، فبالتالي الإنسان حر في أنه يعتقد بالدين الذي يرتضيه.
Since the arrival of the transitional government, we made it clear to the Sudanese people and the international community that we were going to advance human rights issues, including religious freedom. We at the ministry believe that freedom of religion is a fundamental right, that all Sudanese people should be afforded that right. That is why we have taken specific concrete steps to address religious freedom issues, which I am going to mention one by one shortly.
وكذلك ارتكزنا في مبدأ العدالة وتحقيقه بالنسبة لواقع المجتمع السوداني بعد الفترة العصيبة التي عشناها 30 سنة ماضية، العدالة الانتقالية، العدالة الجنائية، العدالة السياسية، العدالة المجتمعية. والعدل هو أساس الحياة وهو أساس الإنسان، فبالتالي اشتغلنا على هذا المبدأ لأنه هذه هي أهداف الثورة.
Our government worked closely with all of the different departments that are basically charged with making sure that they meet the requirements of the revolution. And that is why we began by repealing all of the laws that restricted individual freedoms, including religious freedom. We have worked with the Ministry of Justice to prioritize making transitional justice as a key effort in our government, as well as addressing all of the laws that restricted freedom of religion in Sudan. We believe as Sudanese people, our country is diverse. We have people from different faith backgrounds, as well as from different religious and cultural background. We had to make sure that we establish laws and regulations that respects each and every individual in our country.
الهدف الثالث من أهداف الثورة اللي نحن بنينا عليه أولويات الحكومة الانتقالية كان هو السلام. فبالتالي أولى أولويات الحكومة الانتقالية كان هو إنهاء الحرب وإحلال السلام في البلاد. وفي ده كل الحكومة 20 وزارة اشتغلت على مبدأ إنهاء الحرب، وقلنا مهما كلف السلام من كلفة كان لابد إنه نحن نصل، لأنه كلفته ما بتكون زي كلفة الحرب مهما كان.
We also made sure to address the ongoing wars in different parts of the country as minority and specifically religious minorities suffered in the borders between Sudan and South Sudan. That is why our government prioritized peace, and we are glad to tell the world that we have made progress on that front, and we have signed peace agreement with armed opposition, and today we are celebrating that.
في وزارة الشؤون الدينية والأوقاف يعني أولينا مبدأ الحريات الدينية اهتمام كبير، وده من واقع إنه نحن في وزارة الشؤون الدينية واحد من التحديات الكبيرة اللي كان واقع على عاتقنا، إنه هذه الحريات الدينية هي واحد من الأسباب التي جعلتنا في قائمة الدول الراعية للإرهاب، وده من واقع الخطاب المزري والدولة الغاشمة والطغمة اللي كانت حاكمة السودان كانت تمارس ضغوطات كبيرة جدا على يعني المتدينون في السودان الذين يعتقدون بالديانة المسيحية أو غيرها، ما كان بتسمح لهم بأنهم هم يعني يمارسوا شعائرهم التعبدية بحرية. فبالتالي كان لازم نشتغل على هذا المبدأ بأطر متعددة.
My ministry prioritized religious freedom in Sudan. As you all know, the previous government has made it clear to the world that unless you are a Muslim and unless you are a Sunni, there is no place for you in Sudan. However, my ministry has completely changed that narrative, and now we are working to make sure that we advance religious freedom, not just for the majority, but for all Sudanese people, including Christians, including non-Christians, including traditional religions in Sudan specifically. So we are working to advance the freedom of every single Sudanese person.
كذلك واحد من التحديات الكبيرة اللي احنا وجدناها هو خطاب الكراهية الموجود على مستوى المنابر الإسلامية، منابر الجمعة أو الندوات أو المحاضرات وغيرها. كان في إعلاء لخطاب الكراهية وخطاب العنصرية، وده واحد من الأسباب اللي فصلت جنوب السودان واللي أودت به حرب يمكن يكون في أطول رقعة في البلاد، من أقصى غرب البلاد في دارفور، في جنوب كردفان، في النيل الأزرق، لأقصى شرق جنوب شرق البلاد. فبالتالي كان في خطاب بتاع كراهية ممارس على الناس. كان لابد إنه هذا الخطاب يعني يتعدل، يمشي في خطاب الاعتدال، في خطاب الوسطية، خطاب التعايش الذي يقبل الآخر.
One of the challenges my ministry faced is that there is a system in place encouraging imams to spread hate speech throughout the country. And that has resonated for a long time in a country that was ruled by al-Bashir for 30 years, or almost 30 years. My ministry at the moment is working closely with religious leaders, including Muslim leaders, Christian leaders, and other religious minorities, to make sure that the message we spread is a message of love and message of inclusion, not a message of hate.
وفي ذا نحن اتبعنا وسائل ثلاثة. الوسيلة الأولى أعدت تشكيل مع رئيس الوزراء، أعدت تشكيل مجمع الفقه الإسلامي اللي كان يعبر عن الحركة الإسلامية. الآن هو يعبر عن كل ألوان الطيف المجتمعي الفقهي السوداني، في الصوفية، أنصار السنة، الأنصار الختمية and so on. أعدنا تشكيل المجمع لأنه من مجمع الفقه هذا كان يصدر الفتاوى التي كانت لا تتماشى مع التنوع الموجود في السودان.
I worked closely with Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok to make sure that we dissolved the Fiqh Center that was responsible for basically creating a narrative that perpetuated the former regime's existence in power, as well as distorted other religious minorities. I work closely with the Prime Minister as well as other ministers to make sure that we are building a narrative that is reflective of the diversity of our country and respective of all the religions that we enjoy in our country.
كذلك عملت على تغيير الإدارات بالذات في ولاية الخرطوم. كل الإدارات الدينية اللي بتمارس سلطات الشؤون الدينية في الولاية عملنا على تغييرها لأنها كانت تتبع للنظام البائد.
Another thing that I worked with the government to make sure that we put in place is that we replaced religious administrations in Khartoum City as well as outside of Khartoum City, because the previous administrations were created by the former regime and they were there to perpetuate the message of the former regime. The new administrations we have put in place is a reflective of the diversity of Sudan and the diversity of our people and our religions in the country.
كذلك أصدرت لائحة سميتها لائحة تنظيم دور العبادة لأجل وضع اليد ووضع يد القانون على المساجد وعلى دور العبادة المختلفة التي تصدر الخطب والندوات والمحاضرات من أجل المحاسبة والمراقبة حتى يتماشى يعني خطابه مع خطاب الاعتدال والوسطية، خطاب الدولة اللي هو خطاب التعايش.
I also created a body to make sure that religious leaders in different parts of the country are not perpetuating hate speech during prayers, and they are in line with spreading the message of inclusion and diversity of the country. I made sure that that's important during this transition period and beyond the transition period to make sure that we are headed on the right direction.
بالنسبة لي إخواننا المسيحيون في السودان قلت بصريح العبارة لكل الإدارات تحت الشؤون الدينية أنه لا أريد أن أسمع لفظ الأقليات الدينية في السودان، لأنه إذا كانت هنالك ديانة يتبعها فرد واحد يبقى هو دين محترم ومقدر في هذه الدولة. فلذلك منعت لفظ الأقليات الدينية في السودان، وده تماشيا مع الواقع واحترام مبدأ الحريات الدينية.
I have declared that the Christian group is not a religious minority in Sudan. They are Sudanese and they are of other faith, and they should be respected as the other religions. So to avoid this classification of minority, majority, I have made it clear to all of the religious administration not to use minority, majority classification of religious groups in Sudan. Use the name of the group, Christians, Muslims, African traditionalists, and all of that. But we are avoiding that so that no one is put in a place to look at someone because they're minority, they are less deserving.
وكما تعلمون أنا يعني مع حكومة الفترة الانتقالية عملنا على جعل العيد عيد الكريسماس مناسبة قومية، الإجازة بتاعتها قومية زيه وزي أي عيد من أعياد المسلمين.
As many of you know, I worked with the Prime Minister to make sure that December 25th, a national holiday. And let me be clear, this is not just a holiday for Christians. This is a holiday for all Sudanese to celebrate with their brothers and sisters who are Christians.
وجعلنا الموظفين الذين يعني هم مسيحيون في يعني مؤسسات الدولة أنه كل يوم أحد يخرجون من الساعة 10 صباحا لأداء وممارسة الشعائر التعبدية.
We also made it clear that Sundays is a work day in Sudan. However, every Christian has a right not to work on Sunday. They have they're protected to walk out of work and go pray and take that day off.
أصدرت تعليمات واضحة من مجلس الوزراء للجامعات وللمدارس بأنه لا يوضع أي امتحان في أي مناسبة من الأعياد للمسيحيين.
The government has made it clear that on Sundays, there shouldn't be exams for all of the students that are going from K to until high school. That's to reflect the respect of our Christian brothers and sisters in the country.
مع وزارة التربية والتعليم مع وزير التربية والتعليم بروف محمد الأمين اتفقنا أن يكون هنالك أمران للمسيحية. لا بد أن يكون هنالك معلمون للتربية المسيحية يدرسون التربية المسيحية في المدارس، ليست في الكنائس وإنما في المدارس. وقد أصدر قراراً ووزعه لجميع ولايات السودان أنه استيعاب معلمين للتربية المسيحية، وسمى في الجدول بتاع الحصص كنا زمان بنسميها التربية الإسلامية، لكن سماها التربية الدينية. تربية دينية هذا يدخل فصل التربية الإسلامية وهذا يدخل فصل التربية المسيحية.
I worked closely with the Minister of Education to make sure that our education is reflective of our diversity. Historically, the previous government obviously had a whole course on Islam and systematically discriminated against others who did not believe in Islam. But now we have created a course and we named it religious course that includes Islam, Christianity, and other religions, and that course treats all religions equally. And we also made it clear that Christians who wanted to teach their kids should have the access to do that. And I'm working diligently with the Minister of Education to hire teachers who can teach Christianity in schools.
الآن على مستوى المناهج كما ذكرتم أنتم أن هنالك يعني تعديل في المناهج لتتماشى مع التطور العلمي الموجود في العالم، وكذلك تتماشى مع الواقع الجديد لإدارة التنوع في السودان بعيداً عن الإرهاب وبعيداً عن التطرف والغلو.
We also have made it clear that our new curriculum, education curriculum, is going to reflect not only our diversity, but we are completely getting rid of all of the extremist elements that have put the country on this direction where we were listed as a country of state sponsor of terrorism.
رفعنا إدارة الكنائس، إدارة شؤون الكنائس من كانت إدارة بتكون هي تحت إدارة الإرشاد والتوجيه الإسلامية، رفعناها لتكون هي الإدارة العامة لتدير شؤون الكنائس لوحدها بعيدا عن إدارة الإرشاد والتوجيه الإسلامية.
The previous government had a clear vision on controlling Christianity in Sudan, and they had the Christian churches of council under the fiqh, the Islamic Fiqh Center. But what my administration and my ministry did was that we completely separated that, and we give them the full right to manage Christianity, that the Church of Council in Sudan to be an independent body, just as the fiqh, the center is an independent body that
في ولاية الخرطوم أكثر من 200 لا يتجاوز عدد 10 إلى 15 كنيسة، وبقية هذه الكنائس ليس لها تقنين، لا شهادات بحث ولا يعني كهرباء ولا ماء. الآن نحن جاري مع والي ولاية الخرطوم جاري تقنين هذه الكنائس واستخراج الصكوك يعني كشهادات بحث وصكوك إدارية لها.
When I came to office, there were 236 registered, at least the former regime passed on to us as churches in Khartoum city alone. But our records show that these were just numbers that they used to basically project to the world that they do have these churches in Khartoum. They're just numbers. They did not exist in reality. However, right now I'm working with the governor of Khartoum to make sure that Christians have the right to revitalize their churches and have the access to previously confiscated churches by the former regime.
الأمر الأخير أو قبل الأخير في موضوع الكنائس، لجنة إزالة التمكين بعد خطابات ممكن يكون خطابين مننا من وزارة الشؤون الدينية في مطالبتنا باستعادة الكنائس التي تمت مصادرتها من قبل النظام البائد. شكلت لجنة لهذا الأمر، وعندنا مستشار الوزير لشؤون المسيحيين هو عضو في هذه اللجنة وتباشر مهامها الأسبوع المقبل.
We have created a committee, and that committee is charged with doing a study to find out the churches that were confiscated by the former regime and identify the rightful owner of these churches and return them to their rightful owners. And that committee is actually headed by his friend, who is also an advisor to the Prime Minister.
فيما يتعلق ب يعني العلاقة ما بين الوزارة والكنيسة، تقنين بالقانون وباللائحة، لأننا ما وجدنا قانونا يعني نرتكز عليه. ابتدرنا مشروع لائحة لتنظيم العلاقة بين الوزارة والكنيسة. هذه الآن في طور المشاورة بيننا وبين رؤساء الطوائف والكنائس المسيحية في السودان بعد الفراغ منها والاتفاق عليها بصورة يعني منهجية توافق دستور كل كنيسة. سنوقع عليها لتكون هذه هي اللائحة المعتمدة لتنظيم العلاقة بين الوزارة والكنيسة.
My ministry is working with religious leaders, including Christians, to create a system by which we could provide the services to them that they need. And currently I am working with, when I say religious leaders, I mean all of them equally. I'm approaching them, whether they're Christians or traditional Africanists or Muslims. And we just started this work actually as of this week.
على مستوى حقوق الإنسان يعني نحن يمكن يكون تقدمنا كثير جدا في هذا الأمر. أول حاجة ألقينا قانون الردة، هذا يعني تم إلقاؤه، وكذلك أصدرنا يعني قانون ينظم شرب الخمور بالنسبة للمسلمين وغير المسلمين.
So there are two important aspects that I would like to mention, and I'm personally excited about them. One, we worked closely with our Prime Minister to make sure that we abolish the Apostasy Law. And this is, let me be clear, this is something that is a huge development in our country and in the region. And we wanted to make sure that Sudanese people have the full right to believe in any religion of their choice or not to believe. And also we have made it clear that if you're not a Muslim and you would like to drink alcohol, it's up to you.
وكذلك ألغينا قانون النظام العام. هذا واحد من أكثر القوانين المعيبة في حق الإنسانية وفي حق السودانيين عموما، وأساء إلى بنات الشعب السوداني إساءة بالغة وشوه سمعتنا الخارجية.
Another law that we got rid of, which put us in really a bad, it projected a bad picture about Sudan, is the public order law that demonized specifically women and young people. Today, our young people and Sudanese women in general are free from that very oppressive law.
والآن برضو هنالك قانون لإعدام الأطفال. ألغي هذا القانون ما لم يصل الأطفال إلى عمر 18.
Also, we worked with the Prime Minister to make sure that we got rid of the law that basically give the government the right to punish for public punishment of kids who are not even 18 years old. It doesn't matter what crime they commit today. You, as a kid, you're not going to be executed until you reach to the age of 18.
ونحن بكرة يعني في احتفال باليوم العالمي للطفولة. اليوم مجلس الوزراء أزال كل التحفظات في قانون الطفل في زواج القاصرات وفيما يتعلق بالتعليم للأطفال أو النساء الذين لم يكتمل أو الطفلات اللائي يعني تزوجن مبكرا ولم يكملن تعليمهن. هذه كلها الآن أزلنا اليوم كل التحفظات في القانون بتاع الطفولة، لأنه وجدنا أنه كل الأنظمة السابقة كانت محافظة على كثير من المواد. ألغينا كل هذه، أزلنا كل هذه التحفظات فيما يتعلق بالأطفال، فيما يتعلق بالطفلات، في العلاقة بينهم والآباء وغيرها مع المجتمع.
Also, we have abolished all of the laws that are restricting the rights of kids. And not only that, but also early marriages are not allowed in Sudan anymore. For girls and guys, they have to reach at the age of 18. That's the minimum age that we have set to protect girls from abuse. And as the world celebrates Children's Day tomorrow, we are also excited to join the world and say that we have laws and mechanisms in place to protect kids, finally.
Minister, if I could jump in, sorry to interrupt. If you could just sum it up in 1 or 2 minutes, we'd like to get to some questions because of this, remarkable list. But if you could give a final minute or two, then we'll launch into a few questions. Thank you.
لو اختصرت الكلام اللي عايز تقوله، عندنا كمية من الأسئلة طرحوها بعض الناس ودايرين نقوم نجيب عليها. اتفضل قدم النموذج بتاعك أو قدم الخلاصة بتاعتك.
الخلاصة هذا كثير الذي عملناه في الفترة السابقة، وتبقى كذلك الأكثر في سبيل عودتنا لمنصة حقوق الإنسان ومنصة العالم وتأسيس دولة تحترم حقوق الإنسان وتحترم مواطنيها.
To conclude, I would like to say that we have done a lot to advance not just religious freedom in Sudan, but human rights issues. And we are not satisfied until we have joined the international community and become part of the international community and live by all of the international standards. So thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. That is a really impressive list of reforms that have already been instituted. I just wanted to lead off and first remind the audience, I'm starting to see a number of questions. Just to go ahead and on the Q&A function, you'll have to write your question in, and we'll get to as many as we can. I did want to lead off, Minister, and just ask the question, with so many of these reforms, like repealing apostasy and blasphemy laws and the public order law, how are the Sudanese people responding on the one hand, and on the other, how about the elements of the former regime and extremist elements? Has that been a challenge? Is that an ongoing challenge that you face going forward in doing some of these things that would be unthinkable? And I just wanted to specifically mention earlier this year when we were there, we were part of a conference openly, in a hotel on freedom of religion or belief. And just last month, there was another roundtable, a big event in Khartoum to talk about these issues so openly, which would have been unthinkable just a couple of years ago. So please let us know what kinds of challenges you face in these efforts.
السؤال الأول هو كيف السودانيين بصورة عامة استجابوا على كل التغيرات اللي حصلت، والسؤال الثاني هو مرتبط ببغايا النظام السابق في محاولة إخصاء كل المجهودات التي قمتم بها لتعزيز عملية السلام وأيضا تعزيز الحريات الدينية وحريات حقوق الإنسان بصورة عامة.
أول حاجة السودانيين بطبيعتهم أنهم أهل قبول للآخر وأهل تعايش، والكلام ده قبل 30 سنة ماضية. لكن ال30 سنة اللي كانت حاكمة فيها وحاكم فيها النظام البائد غير كثير من المفاهيم وغير كثير من العادات والتقاليد بتاعت المجتمع. فبالتالي كان المجتمع يعني في بداية هذا الأمر لا يستطيع أن يتقبل أن يتحدث عن اليهود ولا يتحدث عن المسيحية. لكن بعد مرور 3 أشهر مما نحن فيه، وكان هذه هي أهداف استراتيجية مشينا عليها، الآن في قبول تام الحريات الدينية، وأن هنالك تعاون كبير ما بين المسلمين والمسيحيين. بل الأكثر من كده نحن عملنا أكثر من ورشة يعني، وآخر مؤتمر نحن عقدناه بتاع الحريات الدينية كان بين المسلمين والمسيحيين، وفيه رؤساء وقادة الفرق والطوائف الجماعات الإسلامية وكذلك المسيحية. افتكر هذا قبول واضح جدا، حتى على مستوى لم تسجل لنا أي عملية بتاع التضاد للحريات الدينية.
We as the Sudanese people, we love our diversity and we respect each other. This idea of singling out one religion or one group of people is new to us, but it has been part of our culture for the last 30 years because of the acts of the former regime. However, we are now at a place we can say to the world that we are reliving who we are as people who love diversity and respect each other. Before, he said it's fascinating that only 3 months after the regime, the former regime fell, Christians, Muslims, working together, collaborating, engaging. It's fascinating. Not only that, today we are also asking our brothers who are Jews that left Sudan and those who live in Sudan to come and openly participate in this process. And finally, to the part of the elements of the former regime, how they're working to kind of derail this process, is that they know that our eyes are on them. We are determined to continue on this path, and there is no place in Sudan for them anymore.
لا زال النظام البائد أو أتباعه يحاولون أن يقولوا نحن موجودون، لكن الحركة ضعفت. هي ليست كالحركة في بداية ال6 أشهر الأولى لنهاية النظام البائد. الآن هنالك حركة قلت جدا للنظام البائد. ده من واقع إنه كل غادتهم في السجون الآن يواجهون يعني أحكام بجرائمهم التي ارتكبوها، وكذلك أن هنالك لجنة إزالة التمكين منعت وسدت كل الأبواب المالية اللي كانت بتجيهم، فبالتالي بقى لا قادة ولا أموال، فبالتالي عادوا إلى أدراجهم.
One thing I wanted to mention about the elements of the former regime and how they're working actively to derail this process is that as you all know, the leaders of the former regime, the majority of them are in jail today. And not only that, but also we work closely with the Prime Minister and other parts of the government to make sure that we control the money flow. And now that there are no sources of funding to them, and that kind of really pushed them hard. So we're very clear, and we have made it clear not just to the Sudanese people, but to the world, that we are going to continue in this direction of reforming and making sure that we're part of the respected world.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I wanted to follow up in that list of things I was saying that your government had achieved is extraordinary. One of, I misspoke on the blasphemy law. Apostasy you talked about, which is really unique, the first of its kind in the region. But we also have a question, this gets to a question. There was a series of things that the previous regime had agreed to do that didn't get moved forward on. And, you know, as we know, blasphemy is still a crime in Sudan. And I know there were efforts by the civilian, military, and transitional government to address this. We heard about it from you and your colleagues. Could you tell us the status of the blasphemy law and how your government may address that going forward?
قضية التكفير هي ما زالت ممنوعة بالقانون في السودان. هل يمكن أن تخبرنا أن كيفية التعاون مع هذه الجزئية؟ نحن نعلم أن الحكومة الانتقالية لغت الردة ولغت كل القوانين المقيدة للحرية الشخصية، لكن هنالك قضية التكفير ما زالت هي ممنوعة بالقانون.
نعم صحيح، هذا سؤال ممتاز وجيد جدا. طبعا بعد أصدرنا القانون ب يعني إلقاء مادة الردة، أصدرنا يعني مع وزارة العدل مولانا نصر الدين عبد الباري المادة 126 اللي هي أي فرد، تقول أي فرد يكفر فردا أو جماعة أو يسحق دمها أو يعمل خطاب عنصرية أو خطاب كراهية يحكم عليه بالسجن 10 سنوات. وبالتالي بعد إصدار هذه المادة من القانون الجنائي عممنا هذه المادة وبقت هي محل ثقافة وتثقيف للمواطنين، فبالتالي امتنع الناس الآن إلا قليلا خالص وهم غير مرئيين بالنسبة لنا، امتنعوا عن التكفير وعن خطاب الكراهية في كثير من منابرنا والمحلات العامة.
Yes, that is true that the Article 126 has not been repealed. However, we have generalized it. We made it clear that no one in Sudan has a right in the country to make sure that anyone is infidel. No one has a right to declare someone is an infidel or not. And also that part of that is the idea of hate speech. As you know, we came out of this situation and we're working to make sure that even that is going to be repealed soon.
Okay, thank you for that response. We have another couple of questions that I'll pull together here. The previous regime obviously committed many crimes and persecuted minorities, particularly Christians. Question is there a blanket amnesty issued by the government for these previous crimes? How will you deal with some of the persecution committed by the previous regime on religious minorities and to the majority population in general?
ما هي الخطوات اللي من خلالها يتم معاقبة كل اللي ارتكبوا الجرائم ضد الأقليات الدينية في السودان؟
الآن هم يواجهون تهما يعني كبيرة جدا أمام النيابة العامة. النائب العام مولانا الحبر يعني وجه إليهم تهم بالإبادة الجماعية، بتغويض النظام الدستوري، بجرائم يمكن يكون حتى الآن وصلت 41 جريمة يواجهون هؤلاء الذين كانوا يتحكمون في البلاد. أما الذين كانوا يمارسون السلطة في اضطهاد المسيحيون أو غيرهم، بالتالي أغلب هؤلاء إما أن توفوا وإما أن خرجوا وتركوا البلاد. وحتى الذين كانوا يفتون الفتاوى الكبيرة لهم يعني هم كانوا خرجوا خارج البلاد بعد سقوط النظام. لكن كل الذين الآن هم في السجون يواجهون التهم العنف اللي كان بيمارسوه، سواء كان عنف سياسي أو عنف يعني ديني أو عنف مجتمعي في تأجيج الصراع وغيره من الصراعات اللي كانت حاصلة.
The Ministry of Justice has opened a case against every individual who committed crime in Sudan, including crimes against religious minorities in the country. As you know, as I mentioned earlier, the majority of the leadership of the previous regime, now they're in jail, and there are 41 crimes against them. So the government is going to prosecute that. The government is going to prosecute that and make sure that every single person committed crime is held accountable.
Thank you, Minister. There's a few questions I'll pull together here regarding the roundtable that was held last month, which you were part of. And there's some questions around some of the conclusions that came from that roundtable, agreements out of that. So the first question, could you share some of the conclusions that came from that roundtable last month, as well as a question related on apparently the Sudanese Council of Churches had a disagreement on one of your new orders just a month ago related to churches. If you could speak to that, if you're familiar with the Council of Churches who felt something you said was not in line with what they'd like to see.
لدي سؤالين. السؤال الأول هو مرتبط ب هنالك مجموعة من الكنائس هي قررت في أن تكون ضد قرار أنت اتخذته. أنا لا أعلم ما هو هذا القرار، لكن يمكن تنورنا بخصوص هذا القرار. السؤال الثاني هو مرتبط بالقمة، قمة التسامح الديني التي تمت في الخرطوم خلال الأسبوعين الماضيين. يمكن أن تخبرنا عن مخرج واحد أو مخرجات هذه القمة؟
أنا لم أتخذ قرار بعد، إنما أنا عرجت عقبيل على يعني قبل قليل عن موضوع اللائحة التي تنظم العلاقة ما بين الكنيسة والوزارة. في النظام البائد لو تذكرون أن أصدرنا قرار بأنه ألغينا كل الإفادات التي كانت بيد الإدارات التي كانت تتبع للنظام البائد، لأنه كان هنالك مسيحيون يتبعون للنظام البائد وكان بيدهم هذه الصكوك ويمارسون بها العنف داخل سلطتهم داخل الكنيسة. فلذلك ألغينا هذه الإفادات. فهؤلاء هم إلى الآن هم يعني يغضبون لكل قرار اتخذناه. لم نتخذ قرار بعد في ما يتعلق باللائحة. الموضوع كله يتعلق بلائحة تنظيم الكنائس اللي هي التي تنظم العلاقة ما بين الكنيسة. لم أصدر هذه اللائحة، وإنما ابتدرنا هذا المشروع والآن هو بين أيديهم ليعلموا يعني أو يتعرفوا عليها ويبدوا الملاحظات فيما يتناسب مع قوانين ودساتير الكتاب المقدس. من واقع ده مجلس الكنائس تحديدا هو الذي قال لا نريد لائحة، وإنما يكون المرجعية يعني لكل طائفة ولكل كنيسة. وهذا الأمر في واقع جديد زي السودان يعني فيه اللوائح فيه القوانين لا يستقيم أبدا. فلا بد من علاقة تقنن أو لا بد من قانون يقنن العلاقة بين الوزارة والكنيسة دون تدخل في شأن الكنيسة. فهؤلاء هم الذين يعارضون هذا الأمر، ونحن لم نصدر هذه اللائحة بعد ولم نتخذ أي قرار بعد.
My ministry hasn't taken any concrete steps to organize the work of any religious group, whether they're Christians or Muslim or or African traditional beliefs. Actually, those who are opposing us are very minority group who are part of the previous regime. And as you know, the previous regime used minorities from the Christian community and other minority religions to discriminate against the larger population. And there are some voices within these communities that are completely against what we're doing. But again, we're committed to the idea of advancing religious freedom in the country, and we're going to treat every single group equally in Sudan.
Let me go ahead and give an opportunity. Thank you, Minister. I just wanted to give an opportunity for Vice Chair Bhargava and then Vice Chair Perkins to make a comment. Vice Chair Bhargava.
Thank you so much, Dwight. Minister Mufrih, I just wanted to thank you again for what we've heard reflected today, which is the care and the wisdom and really the forethought that you've put towards bringing about the range of reforms within Sudan, and also the courage that you've had to be able to do that. And so we're delighted to have been able to visit with you to see some of that before we were unable to travel the rest of the year, and to bear witness to some of what you are doing, which has been truly extraordinary. And I do hope that as you shared with us, that you're able to be forge a path for other countries in the region and for others to look to for how they can bring about the openness towards religious communities of all backgrounds and all faiths. And so thank you for that. I also want to thank Ambassador Nasreldin for being with us today and for your engagement along with the rest of the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister with USCIRF. It has been such an extraordinary learning experience for us, and a model of how we want to engage and learn from your approach and your again grace and humility in doing so. So just want to thank you again. Vice Chair Perkins.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bhargava. And I'll just echo, for the sake of time, I did have some questions, but I know we're going to have some future conversations. I just want to echo what she said. First, Ambassador, thank you for joining us as well. Thank you for your leadership. But I want to underscore what Anurima said regarding the leadership position that you're in, and how this, as you really carve a path forward, and it's remarkable in what you've done in such a short period of time in repealing the Apostasy Law, and as you move to deal with the blasphemy law, and just to allow freedom of religion for all people. And you're on the right track, and I do hope that we will see a day very soon in which you're on no list except our ally and friend list when it comes to religious freedom. And so just know that oftentimes being the pioneer in leading comes with great difficulty, but persevere, because great things happen. And we look forward to looking back on this point in history to see how Sudan really changed the way other countries look at religious freedom. So thank you for your leadership, and thanks for joining us today.
I'll let the translation come through, but also, Minister, if you could, we'll give you the last word. Mohy, if you could translate both Vice Chair Bhargava and Perkins, and then give him the last word for 1 minute.
Sure. أولا السيدة برغافا هي شكرتك جزيل الشكر لحضور الاجتماع ده اليوم، وهي سعيدة جدا جدا بكل الخطوات اللي اتخذتها حكومة السودان لتعزيز الحريات الدينية وحقوق الإنسان وكل القيم النبيلة. وأيضا كوميشنر توني هو سعيد بوجودك بين اليوم، وهو بيقول إنه السودان حقق إنجازات كبيرة جدا جدا، لذلك تم رفع اسم السودان من قائمة الدول اللي هي مرتكبة أسوأ جرائم حقوق الإنسان. وأيضا الآن السودان مصنف في وزارة الخارجية في جزئية معينة هي مرتبطة ببعض المشاكل المرتبطة بحقوق الإنسان في السودان، وهو بيتمنى إنه السودان يتم إزالة اسمه تماما من كل هذه القائمة. ولو استمر السودان في هذا المجال سيكون من الدول التي ستكون صديقة للولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. وأخيرا عايزين يدوك دقيقة واحدة تقوم تقدم فيها الختام بتاعك وبعض الأشياء اللي أنت محتاج نحن نقوم نقدمها عليك هون من واشنطن دي سي شكل عام كيف.
بشير شكرا، كذلك بارغافا شكرا جزيلا. عمو توني شكرا لك كثير، وسعيد بانه انا اتلاقى معاكم وسعيد بالاجتماع ده، وامنياتنا انه انا اشوف بلدي ووطني السودان بكل هذه الطموحات والاراده والامل انه هو خارج قائمه الدول الراعيه للارهاب. وبمناسبه الدعم اللوجستي، كل ما اتمناه في وزاره الشؤون الدينيه أننا الآن عندنا مركز، سننشئ مركز اسمه مركز الحوار والتعايش الديني. يا ريت لو لقينا دعم مادي ولوجستي لهذا المركز يكون شامل، ندرب فيه الأئمة والدعاة والقساوسة والمطارنة والشباب والشابات لينطلقوا في بناء الدولة. لو بقى هذا إن شاء الله نتواصل معاكم. كذلك الشكر لمحي الدين على الترجمة وعلى الدعم اللوجستي الإعلامي. شكرا لكم كثير وأشكركم، ونتمنى نتلاقى معاكم إن شاء الله في واشنطن دي سي للمرة الثانية وقريبا، أتمنى ذلك.
I would like to thank Dwight Bashir for leading the discussion, as well as the two commissioners. It's great to see you, Commissioner Bhargava, Uncle Tony. It's great to see you, and it's great to connect with you again and discuss these important issues. I wanted you to be aware that we are serious. When we say we are pushing our country in the right direction, we mean it. We're doing it, and we're continuing to do it. So we really appreciate all of the support from your side, advocating for us with the US government, and we continue to ask you to advocate for that. And the final thing I wanted you to know is that my ministry is right now working to establish a center, and it's called Center for Dialogue and Coexistence, Religious Coexistence. And our goal is to work together with religious leaders from all the religious groups in Sudan to spread the message of love, the message of collaboration, the message of togetherness, and we can do this, and we would appreciate any support from you. So thank you very much, and I do thank also Mohy for both translation as well as connecting with us to make sure this happens. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Minister. And unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time. We really just scratched the surface here. And thank you to all those who attended. We couldn't get to many of the questions. We really needed another full hour. But thank you again to our two vice chairs, Anurima Bhargava and Tony Perkins, as well as our honored guest, Religious Affairs Minister Nasreldin Mufrih. I want to also thank Mohy Omer for jumping in as interpreter. And also he helped to organize this event, as well as Thomas Kramer, one of our staff members who worked on this. If you'd like to learn more about USCIRF's work on Sudan, I encourage you to visit our website at www.uscirf.gov. We look forward to hosting similar conversations on other countries and issues in the months ahead. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on USCIRF Conversations. Have a good day.